to this week's Fireside Chat with Jesse. I am joined today by Mike Miller, Business Development Manager at NCMIC. Thanks for joining me, Mike.
You bet.
So I want to say this is episode 105, and I think of the 105, I probably slaughtered half of the intros. I just got lazy and didn't want to edit. But Mike, I appreciate your time today, sir. And for those people who might not be familiar with you, do you mind just kind of introducing yourself and your career in equipment finance?
Yeah, I started this career probably, this is my 13th year, actually, is my 13th anniversary. So been a cool career. I've been in multiple different industries, and this is by far the best industry I've ever been in. So I like it, with a good company. I know some people do move around a little bit. I understand that, but they seem to have gotten it right here and enjoying this career.
That's fantastic. So are you from Iowa originally, or I guess what made you choose NCMIC? Then we'll get into more about that.
Yeah, I'm from Iowa originally. Grew up in Northeast Iowa, small, 250 people. Sales is kind of an interesting thing, and people always say, Mike, how'd you get into sales? I said, well, I grew up in a town of 250 people, and I had to talk to people from 2 years old to 80 years old. And we all had to get along. I said, so, I had to have good communication skills. I said, the other reason I got into sales, have you ever been to a bar and you go up to a girl and ask her to dance, and you're sitting there waiting to go ask her because you're nervous and you're excited, but yet you're nervous. And so you have a couple cocktails and you go over and ask her to dance. She says no. I said, anybody in the room know how that feels? And everybody goes, oh yeah. I go, sales is 100 times easier. So that's why I'm into sales.
I was like, wait, where are we going with this?
Yeah. Yes, correct.
We're a quasi PG show,
Right.
Anyhow,
right.
But remember, eventually the next girl will say yes. So
correct.
Just like sales.
I just learned how to handle rejection early.
Fair. That's fair. And that was one of the challenges that I had. That everyone I think has on sales. It's just what's your formula? 7 no's before you get that one yes.
Yeah.
And then you just have to stick with it and everything else. So
yes. Keep calling.
But you keep calling. Do you mind just kind of giving a little introduction to NCMIC?
Yeah, NCMIC is kind of a cool little company. We celebrated our 75th anniversary last year, and it started chiropractors. It stands for National Chiropractic Mutual Insurance Corporation. Nobody would insure chiropractic for medical liability practice, so a group of people got together and they formed this company and built it on that, and it's become a family company. We insure over 60% of the chiropractors. As we kind of grew about 25 years ago, we got into the finance side of things. So we do equipment finance, we do personal business credit cards, merchant credit card processing, premium finance. So we elevated that division, and then we expanded outside chiropractic to medical, dental, naturopath, and do all those services under the professional solutions name. So yeah, so we've grown together, and we have a lot of different revenue streams. So as one revenue stream kind of has challenges in its cycle of business, these other ones tend to pull up that slack and give us a good steady income. So it's been a cool little company. About 200 employees.
200 employees, and you guys are in Johnston?
Well, it's Des Moines, Iowa. Well, so for reference it's Clive, Iowa, which is a suburb of Des Moines. Okay. Yep.
And like my relationship with NCMIC was, I want to say in 2012, I actually had you guys as a customer. You were the Aspire version 5 guinea pig, literally.
Correct. Yes, we were. yes, we were, and we're still.
So lots of trials and tribulations, and you're still willing to have an interview with me. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Hey, that software changed our front end life. It didn't change the back end life, but you got to work through it. We worked through it, so it's good.
Well, it's the evolution of a product. So definitely appreciated that partnership. I can't believe it's 10 years ago. That's crazy.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Yeah. Well, I can tell by your gray hair.
Well, I just
I
got a
got it too.
haircut too. I got
Yeah,
a
I got it
haircut
too.
too.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but so on that business side with your specialty in chiropractic equipment, I guess just in chiropractors in general, what were your what was your portfolio like 2 years ago? How are you guys looking at your customers?
Yeah.
Because I'm assuming that's one of those industries where it's like, I don't know if that qualifies as medical or not.
Hmm.
Are they essential or?
Hmm. Yeah, what you'll find in this industry, because, and it's really interesting because of our niche and because of what we did in the profession. Plus, we donate millions of dollars to the profession, so we help the profession. We're at every show. We're doing a lot of conferences, and so we're involved in the profession. And because they own our company, right? We're a mutual insurance company. That they have the skin in the game to make us profitable, right? Because they get dividends at the end of the year if we hit a certain profitability level and reduce our claim losses. So it's almost like a family. And so they're more, what we found, especially in 2020, is yes, they needed help. Um, and we modified, over 1,000 loans, and didn't have had one go bad in that period of time. But they know us, so they're going to pay us first compared to, like, let's say, maybe a financial institution. There's just not that connection like there is with us. And so we have a little niche going on here, and they're just great people. And then during that 2020 time frame, uh, you know, chiropractors, if you look at business revenues, you have some really high successful chiropractors out there, but there was a lot of them that are in that low mid range revenues. Um, I would say their revenues were smaller than most businesses. So when they had to go to their banks, get PPP loans where they had relationships, they couldn't get them. They're the last on the list. So no one was getting it to them because they're just getting left behind because they're just small amounts that they wanted. So we went to the SBA and got approved. It took us twice, but we got approved,
Oh,
and we did over 7 million in PPP loans. Helped well over, I think, four or 500 chiropractors get PPP loans. And so for us, that was a busy time. And believe it or not, that that changed the game on what we were doing too. So I think we talked a little earlier about what else did you do? What was business like in
yeah.
2020? For us, very concerned, right? But we stayed with it, had no issues. And then my thing was, as a business development person, people really don't understand sometimes what that means. You have account managers, you have business development people. Account managers do relationships of current accounts. Business development people find new accounts. People were picking up the phone, and I was making the calls, and I picked up more business in 2020 than I did in any given year. When people say, well, I'm up, I'm over, I set that stage. I smoked it in 2020 and 2021 because people were talking to me, and a lot of people had left or were just left the industry, or just pulled way back and shut it off. So we stayed the course, again, because we're diversified, and we do a good, we have a good portfolio of A lender type credits, and just did great and still doing great.
That's awesome. Plus, you're a fun guy to talk to. So, I would think if all of a sudden I see your number pop across and I'm like home with my, wife and kids, it's like, I'm going to go talk to
Right.
Mike. Like,
Right.
let's go talk to Mike.
Yeah, it's funny, a lot of the, at that point in time, politics was big, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that was the election year. So, you had a lot of, one of the things I always told people is, if a political party wanted to come and ask me what the temperament of the small business guy is, you know, multiply 50 calls a day times 350 days a year. I'm talking to a lot of people, and I talk to everyone in every state, and it was pretty common thread of what was on their mind. And I think a lot of people got it wrong on what was on their mind. And so it was just a fun thing, because they had more time to talk. They wanted to kill some time, and they were more open to talk about things. They weren't busy in their business, in retrospect. But yeah, things were good.
That's good. I mean, so for people watching this and they're just getting involved in the business development side, Mike, what recommendations would you have to people? Like what's worked for you, and then where have there been some things, because we're all different, right? You have your own way of
Mhm.
doing things. I have my own way of selling. Some pros and cons, and then I guess just yeah, overall.
Well, I think the biggest thing, this is my seventh industry I've been in, plus I had my own business.
Okay.
Been a top performer in all those businesses. Won trips, incentive trips and things, and hit my numbers. What I find is, all industries are fairly similar, right? And what I find though is it isn't always the salesperson that's the issue. It seems to be where when things aren't going good, that target seems to be them, or that's the only thing they can say. "Well, you have to get this done. We need this. We need the money, or we need to make profit. We have to have growth." Well, what you find out in this, I've probably left four of them where I've left is because it seemed like, and I was in technology, so it seemed like the time was over. They weren't keeping up with the technology. They weren't keeping up with their products. Yeah, they believed them, but the market wasn't accepting them. Had nothing to do with my ability. So what I found is that through those seven scenarios and my own business, I just kept doing the same things that you read in books, or you take in classes, or that you listen to other professionals about, which I recommend highly doing that to make yourself better. And you just stick with it and don't take it personal. It's not necessarily you that makes that, how do I say, it's not your fault that companies go bad, right? Or they lose money, or they go out of business. And what I found is that when, luckily the end of my career, I hope this is the end of my career here, is you find a company that understands that, right? And they're more stable, and they understand growth models. And, we all want growth, and we all want to do these things. And sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, but you got to be able to assess what you're going after, and you got to have good sound reason for doing it, and not just kind of like knee jerk in it. Technology is a tough space. Now, I was
Yeah.
in the investment world too. Investment world was a tough space. Um, it's just, I've been in food business too, where you get in the Me Too stuff. You got to have a differentiation. And I think one thing people would say about me, and I hear it back from customers, is just the consistent follow up. I have a very regimented CRM system on Salesforce. I come in every day and I know exactly what I got to do because all my tasks are set up, and they're
Mm.
consistent, and they're 2 months or 3 months, or if it's certain different scenarios I got to follow up more. It's all set up on cadence. And so they say I'm the most persistent, consistent salesperson they've ever heard, because I just keep calling. And as you know, in business, um, I started out in the vendor side of things, and more of the really competitive, rate conscious scenarios. Well, we found that over time, it's more than that, and people do understand that, and it's about consistency. I mean, we've had scenarios where vendors and brokers would say, my business went up 15% because of the speed that you offer, and the speed to make the decision, so that they didn't have to wane about, okay, 3 days later, do I want to do this? 4 days, time kills all deals. So I was able to win it that way. And in the end of the day, um, you know, we're in that micro ticket market of 5 to 75,000 interest rates, and there's just not that much interest that makes a difference, because of that. People buy equipment for one of two reasons: solve a patient problem or a customer problem, and make money. And if you can
Yeah.
show them and talk to them about that, they'll move forward on the equipment and not focus on the other things. Because if they're going to worry about $10 and $15 a month difference in a payment, when they can make $300-400, a week on that, or a day on a piece of equipment,
Yeah.
get them to focus on that. That seemed to start gelling with my clients and my sales reps. One of the things I looked at too, I took my experience, and I was taught, in the Xerox model. Everybody else talked about the Xerox model, and I worked for Xerox, and they had a very regimented training program and really taught you value. They were never the cheapest, and but they knew how to take costs out of your system through streamlining their technology. That seemed to be the coolest place to learn that selling skill. And and we talked a lot about the ROI, and why people do things. You can't uh, force something people don't want, and people got to want the technology or the service as well. And if they don't want it, you just got to wait for the right time.
No,
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 yeah,
absolutely. Um, that's some really good tidbits there. I mean, I always found what helped me was this the brand that you create, and it's that, you be consistent to your brand and then business follows. But I can definitely relate to some of the technology stuff where if what you're selling, if you're not confident in what you're selling and the business doesn't understand that, then move on.
right,
There's something else out there.
right,
You Because otherwise you sit there and you lack confidence, so you're not going to be putting your best foot forward for yourself or the customer.
right. And hand in hand, I grew up in the IT business with Unisys Corporation when I worked my first jobs out of college and did technical work and tested mainframe computers back when they were like trucks. And back then it was booming. Then I watched that technology change, and our engineering missed it. I mean, and so you move on, right? Um, but I've seen that in the 7 companies I've been with. You see where people make some huge errors in what they're trying to develop and what they're trying to do. And you talk about innovation and constant change. You have to evolve. And no different than if you go to a company and they've got the latest and greatest. Think about the cell phone, era where, oh, cell phones were hot. Well, now that market's commoditized. Yes, people are using them more in different ways, but they've had to create different technology and applications to get you more integrated with that. And then competitions catches up, right? So,
Yeah,
you know, everybody can do that. Then you get into the Me Too. Well, of course, then, then what happens? Well, then it becomes a price war game, and then it's a race to the bottom. And it just you watch these companies do it over and over again. It's kind of frustrating. But you take your cycle and you move on to the next cycle of what's hot out there. And that's one thing I always worried about. I found with IT was you better be with a good product, and they better be with a company that can change what they're offering, because the consumer or your customer changes as well, and you got to feed into that need.
everything's always evolving, and if you don't look at yourself or your organization doesn't evolve along those lines, then someone's going to eventually surpass you. I mean, I was going to ask you, what books, or what is there a book or books that you would recommend to somebody? Because what you're just describing reminds me of something that I recently finished, was Blue Ocean Strategy. I know it's been out there for a while, but it kind of goes into some of that there, where it's you find something, you commoditize it, and then all of a sudden the competition maybe catches up. Um, yeah. Any books you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, you got to use spin selling was a good one, because
Yep.
you can't sell price. I had a class in college marketing under Zig Ziglar. He's a great guy, common sense guy. What you find is that you get that side of it, more of the strategic side of it, but then you got the other side where people will quote, well, to be best at your craft, you got to practice, 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 practice. Well, you can be practiced and be educated, what you need to do. But the other side of that equation is, if you don't have the product line or the
Yeah.
vision with your company, again, that's not the salesperson's fault if you took the time on the other side, and they have a hard time. And at the end of the day, it's tough for companies. They have to make that decision. At the end of the day, are they standing? I'll take, of those 7 companies, 4 of them went bankrupt. And we all know Xerox was close to that too. But I had 4 companies that went bankrupt. It's not my fault. I mean, I was good at what I did. So you just kind of got to go with the flow on that. And you looked at the company, you did the assessment, and sometimes they just don't have the product.
Yeah, I always laugh at that comment where people are like, "Oh, you're really good in sales. You could sell anything to anyone." I'm like, "No, I can't,
Mm-mm.
because if I don't believe in what I'm selling, or something doesn't need to be sold, it's not me."
Right. And people have to, you just have to understand that. And I think part of that gets, when you create a product and you come flying out of there and you're making all this money, you just think it goes forever. Nothing goes forever. So you get caught too late in the game, and someone else comes around the side and just takes it away. I've seen it so many times
Yep.
in separate industries. I mean, I was in the computer industry, I was in the financial services industry, I was in the meat industry, I was in the copier business. Now I'm in, equipment finance industry. Um, it all changes.
So what are your thoughts on, I guess, when you went to your first equipment finance trade show? I'm assuming it was probably NIFA. or even was that EAEL? I guess 13 years ago.
Well, when I started my first 4 years or 5 years was just calling on medical and vet vendors. So I went to a lot of those shows.
Huh.
I came in out of 2009 when the crash had just kind of started going away, right?
Yeah.
And so 10 was my first year, which is struggle. Which was interesting as I was maybe one of 6 finance people at a show. Now you're one of 100, or I mean, it's just gotten like everybody went there now, and that's the model. And then what I found in those scenarios was a race to the bottom again, because if you talk to a lot of the people that are in our industry and had started there as well, the people that were getting the business because of rate, I talked to those folks after the fact because they came into the broker model.
Mm.
And what I found was they were losing it at 10th of percent too, and they were the lowest then, and they were still losing it at 10th percent. So there was no loyalty to that, and they were making it all about rate. But again, you look at the time that you were in. Rates went from when I was, in the 80s. My first house was 10%. Then it went down to two. My last one was 2.25. So that whole industry was trained to sell lower, 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 lower rates. Now what are they going to do? It's going to be tough for people to come back in that space. Again, it was a race to the bottom, and I just have never been that way because there's plenty of people playing in that space, and unfortunately, what was happening is they were training I think some of the vendor reps were getting some bad sales skills given to them because they thought Ray would do it. Well, I'm a proponent of I created tools to teach people how to sell the way I was taught, and I got better relationships that way, because what happened was they got incremental sales that they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. Because when a person doesn't want to buy something, it's never about one thing, right? There's several objections. It can be price, can be rate, can be ROI, it can be tax consequence, it can be personal consequence, and then it could be credit. And there's 5 or 6 I just mentioned. How do you figure them out? You got to find all those out. And there's not going to tell you to their face, I hate your product, get away from me. I mean, people just don't do that.
No, they
So
ghost you. Was it
right,
ghosting nowadays?
right,
You're
right,
like, can
right,
you just tell me no so I stop calling you? That'd be great.
right. And sometimes that's the best. Like I tell people, I'm not here to, the hardest one I had to figure out for an objection was, hey, I know, I'm not here to make your day bad. They'll pick them up. Oh, you're a finance guy. I'm not here to make your day bad. I'm not here to waste your time. Just telling you what I have to offer and what I can do, and just want to see some of the scenarios you're going through. And if I can help, if I can't, no big deal. There might be a time when we work together later, but we can
Sure.
part fast friends now and move on. That was hard to say because,
No,
again,
yeah.
you're looking to make a sale, right? And then you have to let something go. It's just not the right time. And how many people I've had in my database for 13 years that now come back because I'm still here because their relationship went away. It's just not the right time.
No, I mean, I just got back yesterday from the ELFA annual. And there were people that I've spoken with for the last 17 years. That was my 17th. Well, I guess 16th because one didn't happen. It was virtual. But there's people that I knew 17 years ago that you just make that contact. You make that 5-minute handshake. Hey, what's going on? And now it's probably do business with like 3 to 5 of them.
Mm-hmm.
So you just never know, and do the right thing. Just stay in contact. I know you look at I know the initial thought of people is, oh, well, they don't like me because they don't want to do business with me. And it's like, no, it just might not be a good fit, or the timing might not be appropriate.
Right. And you look back at some of those relationships, they change companies too, and they're looking for people and they remember you. And I always tell people, you got one thing, your integrity and reputation. And
Yeah.
if you don't create that over time, and keep that over time, you're not going to get that second opportunity when they go somewhere else or do something else. So if you can keep that intact, you got to remember that that's all you really got in this world. And there's enough shysters out there that say they're going to do one thing and don't do the other. And it's just part of life. But you got to separate between those folks, but you can't make yourself that way. You got to have good credibility.
No, it makes sense. I like that you said those 2 words you mentioned of what you need to have reminded me of the political correct Scarface comment.
Yep. Great movie.
For those people who know that movie, they'll understand what I'm saying. I'm
Right.
not going to say it here.
Right.
But so moving into, I guess, trade shows, what are your thoughts on like some of the NEPA shows? Because by the time this airs, we'll be less than a week away from being in Nashville. Um, so let's talk about I guess those trade associations, Mike, and what they've meant to you since you've been in here.
Yeah, it's funny. It's great. That's a great question because after 5 years of pounding it, doing the vendor shows, I found the broker network on my own and just kind of just delve into it. I knew it existed. My president at the time knew it existed, but we fully didn't understand it, right? So when you don't understand
Okay.
something, you just don't get into it. And so I just kind of just pioneered it, and we kind of invested in going out a few shows. And the first year was tough, and I went to both types of associations. And I think what I've learned about especially NEPA association is these people have traveled, right? And they know the business, and they've been in it 30, 40, some of them 50 years. And the thing that I found most interesting was, one, the depth of knowledge people had and just the tenure they had in the finance area. And there's so many different angles and ways. But what I found, to do financing, but what I found is that they were all in it. They all had the best interest of the customer, right? Because there are different ways a customer needs to finance to get money to be able to do things, whether it's just a simple loan, whether it's factoring, whether, I mean, there's working capital. It was just a broad base of different products that were in there that intrigued me, because at the end of the day, when you start talking about the economy and business, and if you're in this industry talking to equipment vendors, that's all that's on their mind, right? And they're dealing with business people all day long. You've got to be able to help them. And NEFA has allowed me to learn that part of the business and made me better. The shows are very important to learn about what's going on with topics, to keep on top of your business. Again, because things change. You got California lending license, you've got all kinds of changes in regulation coming down, and you got to keep up on that. I don't know where else you would get that information, because it can affect your business big time, and you just got to be engaged. The other thing I found too was just people who are in the business. It's kind of like a little family, what I call kind of like NCMIC. They've been around a long time. These guys have been around a long time. They know each other. They're competitors. You'd never know it. And they just get along and help each other. And it's just a good peer-to-peer group to be in there, and you just learn a lot of things. And there wasn't one person that was not willing to talk or help me get through it. And I credit too being a funding source. If you go to these shows, there's a lot of funding sources there, but no one ever felt
Mhm.
like you were competing. And when you go to the events, you get to talk to people. It's amazing how open and sharing people can be in this community. And when I made that move, because I was facing a little uphill battle because we weren't always the cheapest in rate, but we had a great product. Just because we could pay it off early with no penalty or future interest charges anytime. Well, that was unique. Well, you can live off that for a while, but you still got to build some value. And NEFA gave me that, going to those shows, and made me a little bit more intelligent about what I do, and talk about knowing your craft and being knowledgeable about what you do, so you're confident when you're talking. That they help do that.
No, and like spot on in regards to, I this is my third company that I've been with since I've been in the industry, and with all of them, didn't matter if I was selling the outsourced solutions or selling software. There's enough of business out there for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is it? Friend petition instead of
Mm-hmm.
competition, something like
Mm-hmm.
that, where
Mm-hmm.
people just open and share. Obviously, they're not going to share the entire secret sauce, which you don't blame them, but they're there, and that's a good way to learn more. So it's
Well,
one
a
of the
lot of
reasons I enjoy
people,
it. Yeah.
yeah, and a lot of people who've been in these associations, when they leave the industry, they still, excuse me,
Yeah.
still come to the association.
Yeah.
So then
Well, I
then
mean,
they- then they tell you everything.
lifelong friends.
Yeah, and they share with you, and then they want you to succeed. And you talk to those folks, they've all had failures, and they've all had setbacks, and you talk about, I always tell people, if you really want to take the fast track on life and try and get it the best outcome with the least amount of pain, is talk to people older than you. And I think that's been my motto, and they've come before you, and there's not a whole lot of thing that is different. Technology, yeah, there's some different stuff,
Yeah, it
but
changes.
the
Changes.
process,
Yeah.
the company, the experience, some of that's the same. That's the same process. And when those things get sideways, that's when you start getting into pain and problems.
No, no, it's fair. That's fair. So I asked everyone who comes on here, Mike, to give a little fun fact about themselves. Now this is recorded and it will be online, so just keep that in the back of your mind. But yeah, anything you'd like to share with the audience?
Oh, fun fact. I mean, I just don't take life. Sometimes I'm serious, but sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'm not. You got to laugh, and if you can't laugh at yourself and laugh some goofy things that we all do, um, you know, I don't know what, but I guess a fun fact for me, people always tell me, I'm a big biker, which people necessarily wouldn't look. I like to bike, but I like to read a lot of self-help books, and people go, "What?" I have great faith, and I read self-help books, and sometimes to a fault, because I'm always trying to fine tune me, right? Because I always, at the end of the day, no matter what the pain and problems I create in my life, I got to be responsible for them. Can't blame everybody else. And so my fun fact for me is, you got to dig into that, because I don't know how you get through life if you can't sit there and figure out, okay, you know, you did this, you got yourself into that situation. As you know, you go to these conferences, there's situations, and you gotta pick
Sure.
and choose, right?
Sure,
And
absolutely. And that's good though. I mean, typically it takes you like years of therapy to understand that.
well, my psychology. Somebody said to me, "Well, what's your major, marketing? Or what's your minor, psychology?" And they
Ah,
said, "Well,
okay. So you knew
why
you knew
psychology?"
early then.
Well,
You knew early.
I went through a divorce, so I had to figure out, what was my role in this, right? Because there's two sides to it. And I
Mhm.
figured that out. And then I also figured out that now I can help understand my customers a little bit better too, right? Because there's a lot of psychology into sales.
That is true. That is true. That's why during the pandemic, when I couldn't travel, I became a certified coach because
Hmm.
I wanted to learn the coaching side of the sales process as opposed to consulting, which is
Right.
basically just a different way of questioning someone when you're asking them
Correct.
about their
Hmm.
requirements.
Right. Yeah. And you know what? It's a little bit more consultative too. It takes that sales buzz off. I always tell people when they go through my business justification tool module that I have, it makes you consultative, because everyone's knocking on the door and say, "Hey, look what I got! Look what I got! You want to buy it? What's your price?" I just got tired of that. Too
Yeah.
simple.
Selling the value, selling the
Hmm.
relationship.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what's made it fun. I think one thing about the finance industry, if I compare all my industries, it's more transactional, which I like, because I get a lot more successes every
Yeah.
day. Because I've probably been on this call and probably had 10 apps come in. So for me, it's that's the fun part. But I'll tell you, my first year was brutal, because I didn't know anything about the industry. I had sales skills and no relationships. And I think the thing with any company you're in, the other side of that one is, I said earlier in my comments about, sometimes if you're with technology companies and they don't evolve, you got to leave and find other places. There's another side of that too, where if you find a company and they've got the right things, but they just need that business development person to stay with it. I've been rewarded for staying with it for 13 years, no doubt about
That's
it.
right.
So I've played both sides of that coin and feel good about where I'm at now.
Well, kudos to NCMIC for seeing that and then keeping you there, because that's another tough process too.
Hmm.
Is if you have
Hmm.
people above you that are trying to keep you underneath them,
Hmm.
eventually you're going to go find a place where you can just go be yourself and shine.
Right,
So
and they do. They value their employees. I've never seen a company take care of their employees more than anybody. And it's funny. The only people that I think um, don't understand is if they've never been anywhere else. If they've been
mm,
with MCMIC for 40 years, you don't realize how brutal it got out there. Think back in the 80s when you had pensions and all that stuff, and giving you this and that. NCMIC hasn't changed. They're still that way. And you don't. That's an anomaly. It just doesn't exist. And that makes a difference for me too, right? You're more at peace. You're settled. You're taken care of. They're going to take care of you. Um, and also with a smaller company, you have impact, right? So
Yeah.
they're asking you for ideas. They're looking for ideas. Everyone's at the table, and you're saying hi to your CEO every day. It's just a cool thing that they're all listening to you, asking you what's going on. And I've never navigated that. I've been with major companies, and I've been with one smaller company, and too small is sometimes tougher. This seems to be the right size for me and fits with me, because you got some stability, but at the same time, you got input, and you collectively. One thing I've learned here too is one of our models is, here's what the job needs, or here's what the company needs you to do. Here's what we need to be successful. Here's all these different roles and that people need to fill. Who wants to fill what? Fill the role with the person who wants to be in that role. I joke around with, everyone knows Jen Finken too, and I joke around with her. She likes the account management position. She loves it. She could not do business development. She does not want to do business development. I, on the other hand, and she said I could make calls, but there's just no way. I just don't want to do it. And then I say, well, just the opposite. I don't want to do all the paperwork, transactional stuff. I want to do the phone calls. And she looks at me, and it's just finding people that fit the role. And we've really hit stride here. I think we found people that fit the role. The role is a role. And if you have interest and you want to change that as you grow as a person, you got to assess that, who you are, try it, and see if that's where you fit. But you know, I found my calling in my space. I know I've always been a salesperson. My IT guy when I was in computers was just totally not where I should have been. Troubleshooting, did that for 8 years and painfully didn't like it.
No,
Said
no.
you should have been a salesman, Miller. Well, he was right. So
Well, that's awesome, Mike. And yeah, I mean, having the right butts in the right seats is crucial. But
very
it doesn't
crucial.
mean that you can't go try something. But
Correct.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, perfect. Well, what we got here? Like I said, when this airs, I think we'll be less than a week out from NIFA. I look forward to seeing you in Nashville, and appreciate your time today, sir.
Yep. I appreciate it. And thanks for getting me on the call, and anything I can do for the organization, let me know.
All right. Thank you
Great.
very much,
Bye,
Mike. You
Jesse.
have a good day.
Yep.
Take
Take
care.
care.